Angola has indicated that it may be willing to help the former colonial power Portugal with the possible financing of a bailout in the midst of the Eurozone-wide economic crisis. Joining us now on the line from Lisbon in Portugal to discuss whether or not this is capital flight or strategic for Angola is Pedro Seabra, researcher at the Portuguese International Relations and Security Institute. Pedro, thanks so much for your time. At the moment, it's just indications of goodwill, nothing cast in stone and concrete. But it's interesting, a reversal of fortunes, that Portugal, with its own sovereign debt issues, could be looking to Angola, its former colony, for help.
Indeed, it is a very interesting relationship, but I think first we have to take in consideration that the first Angolan investments have already made their way into Portugal back in 2007. So it's not exactly groundbreaking news. What is happening now that's worthy of greater attention is that precisely because of the economic crisis in Portugal, many opportunities abound for greater Angolan investments. And so we can only expect these investments and the Angolan interest to grow in the near future in Portugal.
Okay, let's draw a distinction here, Pedro. Obviously, Portugal's discussing with the IMF a bailout package of $105 billion. Part of the condition is privatization. Would they be going to Angola to help finance some of that debt, or are they going to Angola to present new investment opportunities?
The first step will obviously be to welcome new Angolan investments. In that sense, we can understand our Prime Minister's visit to Luanda last week, in which, beyond conveying the official strength of bilateral relations, he also made himself very clear that he and his government welcomed greater Angolan investments in Portugal. And those privatizations that you talked about are precisely the best opportunities nowadays for Angola to increase its presence and its influence in our economy.
All right, we know that Angola is cash flush because of oil revenues and higher oil prices. They've got about $24 billion in international reserves. If they came shopping in Portugal, what sort of assets would they be looking for?
Well, first of all, the main asset is currently Portugal's oil company, in which Angola, through its own oil company, so Angola already has an indirect share. But it is expected that it will want in the near future to have a more direct position in that company. But beyond that, we could also point out the banking sector in Portugal, in which there are already several Angolan investments on the way, and there are also rumors going around in Lisbon that Angolan investments are probably setting their eyes in some Portuguese media companies. So one could see that there is a wide effort to expand this investment, and that they are only bound to grow.
Obviously, Angola, as you said, since 2007 has increased its profile, and they already, Angolan investors, own about 4% of the Lisbon Stock Exchange. How does that make the Portuguese feel?
Well, the thing is, for most of this time, a large part of the Portuguese society was not aware of these investments, especially because they were kept under the radar. But as I said, with the crisis, everything is out in the open, and this privatization process that we are talking about is a very much public process. And of course, questions are being raised, doubts are being raised, and some suspicions are being raised by some fringes of the Portuguese society that see these investments with some caution and with some suspicion, and especially so if we take into consideration some lack of transparency claims and regarding the actual origins of the money, where the money is coming from. So as the investments grow and as the publicity of them also grows, suspicions and some doubts by some parts of the Portuguese society will also grow for sure.
Obviously, Pedro, like I said, this is not a deal that's cast in stone. It's still diplomatic discussions. Those who are skeptical say that Angola should actually be investing in Angola. They should be building roads. They should be concentrating on electricity supply. They should be tackling poverty, which is pervasive in Angola. They should not be getting themselves involved in bailouts in Europe. Do you get a sense that there's a big section of Angolan society that feels that way?
There is, of course there is. But we have to understand that behind these investments there is a clear political will by the Angolan state to expand its investments abroad. Clearly, it's not focused or it's not concerned in investing that money in their society, and it's clearly more focused on trying to expand their influence abroad and trying to project the image of growing regional power with enough money to spend in their former colonial masters. So the idea that they could spend that money in their own society is currently not even in their own agenda. I think that what we are witnessing here is a clear drive by the Angolan state to back these investments by either Angolan private investors or by Angolan public companies in other countries, just to project the image of a rebuilt nation and a growing regional power.
But Pedro, things can't be as crude as just wanting to extend their influence abroad. If we look back to 2011, Angola has struggled with oil production due to technical issues. So they haven't earned as much from high oil prices as they could have done because they're not producing as much. So there's some structural issues in the economy that makes them vulnerable. And because of that, there is a sense that even prudence in Angola would hold them back. They would be worried about the ability to create a stabilization fund for the Angolan economy, especially because the global markets are so volatile. They don't really know what they're going to be earning in the future. So the Angolans are not as bullish as we think they are.
No, they are not. There is always those concerns in terms of macroeconomic policies. And of course, we also have to take into consideration the social effects of such policy of trying to invest abroad, what they could be investing internally. But I think at the end of the day, they see this as a way of gaining leverage abroad. For example, one of the reasons that's also being constantly pointed out as for the purpose of investing so heavily in Portugal is because Portugal is seen by many of the Angolan authorities as a possible gateway to Europe and to other European Union markets. So again, there are those concerns that certainly many Angolan policymakers take into consideration, but at the end of the day, this is clear a foreign policy drive behind those investments with clear and specific foreign policy objectives of trying to gain some leverage abroad and trying to present an image of a country that at the end of the day, it's probably not that accurate.
Okay, and a final question, Pedro. What about the fact that we could see this money, as it leaves Angola, come back to Angola? Because the propensity of Portuguese companies to do business in Angola, to get tenders for infrastructure, is very, very high. And so ultimately, Angolans would be shareholders in entities that are increasingly doing business and trade with Angola.
There is that possibility. I think that they are trying to focus their investments in companies that have the ability or that are already working or doing business in Angola. So there is that concern in at least trying to build up a consortium of Portuguese, Angolan companies doing business in both countries. So we could, yes, talk about a possible return of that investment to Angola.